It is Champ Week throughout college basketball, and we're here to get you ready for the Big 12 Conference Men's Basketball Tournament, which tips off Tuesday in Kansas City. Thanks for being with us here on the Golden Blue Nation podcast, brought to you as always by Mountain State Oral and Facial Surgery, your premier dental implant destination. Nick Farrell here with you. It's been a bit of time since I've been with you. Happy to be back, and we're joined from Kansas City by the one and only Ryan Decker. And of course, Kansas City is where the Mountaineer women just ran the table as the 2 seed and won the Big 12 Conference Tournament for the first time since 2017. We'll discuss that a little bit more. The focus of this show is, of course, on men's basketball, the tournament tipping off in less than 24 hours from when we're recording this. But, Deck, what an incredible accomplishment by Coach Kellogg's crew.
Definitely not the ending, I guess, but another statement in what has been a great season for this team. And the one thing I keep going back to now that we've got a little bit of separation from the end of last night's game is that they kept showing it on the telecast. 11-0, number 1 seeds in that tournament were against the number 2 seed in the championship game. Well, now that's 11-1, and what a big one that is for West Virginia.
Absolutely so. We'll discuss it a little bit more later. For now, though, let's put the focus on Coach Hodge and his Mountaineers. They're the 7 seed at the Big 12 Conference Championship. That means they play Wednesday in the second round. They got a first round bye by virtue of their win in the season finale against UCF. The other byes belong to 5-seed Iowa State, 6-seed TCU, the 7-seed Mountaineers, and 8-seed UCF somehow, despite losing at the final game of the regular season, also snuck in backdoor cover of sorts into a bye in the first round. Double byes go to 1-seed Arizona, the outright regular season champ, 2-seed Houston, 3-seed Kansas, and 4-seed Texas Tech. Kind of remarkable that there was a 3-way tie for seeds 3, 4, and 5, and Iowa State gets left out. So, with West Virginia as the 7 seed, that means the Mountaineers are locked into a second-round game that's going to tip off Wednesday at 7 Eastern on ESPNU. Mountaineers will face either 10-seed BYU or 15-seed Kansas State. That game set for Tuesday at 7 Eastern. So everybody's going to be keeping their eye, Deck, at least from a Mountaineer perspective, on the BYU-Kansas State game, 2 opponents that West Virginia has played relatively recently. In fact, 2 of West Virginia's final 3 regular season games were against those opponents. So let's start with the higher-seeded team here as we try to analyze and break down what could be next for West Virginia. BYU, the 10 seed, seems like it could potentially be the tougher of the 2 opponents for a lot of reasons. Of course, BYU was nationally ranked when it faced off against West Virginia, but has stumbled a little bit here down the stretch. And a big reason why West Virginia won the recent meeting at Hope Coliseum, it was a single-digit margin, I believe it was an 8-point win, was A.J. DiBonsa, the possible first-round pick in the upcoming NBA draft, was held to just 4 points or something like that in the first half by West Virginia's defense. And even though DiBonsa scored at a much higher rate in the second half, WVU did enough to win the game. It feels like, Deck, and maybe you'll disagree with me here, but it feels pretty obvious to say that if West Virginia is going to beat BYU in a neutral court, in a tournament setting, it is going to have to clamp down on DiBonsa as well or better than it did in the regular season.
Definitely so. And of course, as you mentioned, DiBonsa, the possible number 1 overall pick in the upcoming NBA draft. But it's not just DiBonsa for BYU. It's Robert Wright III as well. And people need to keep in mind, this team now has enough games under their belt, BYU does, without Richie Saunders. And I think they're figuring out, again, how to play with one another. They got that big win over Texas Tech in the regular season finale at home, court storming, which, again, I don't know if a top 25 team can really court storm at this point. Like, we're getting to... Anyways, another time. But BYU, definitely the tougher opponent for West Virginia between BYU and Kansas State because of DiBonsa, because of Robert Wright III and what he can do at all 3 levels. But yeah, if West Virginia is going to beat BYU, it starts with locking down DiBonsa like you did in the first half of that meeting a couple weeks ago. And then I go back to what Ross Hodge said after Friday night's win over UCF. He was asked, you've done these postseason runs now at a lot of different levels. What does it take essentially to win in March, win in the postseason? And he had a couple of different things. And you can almost break it up, I think, by opponent that West Virginia will play in the second round. For BYU, you have to win pretty, but you also are going to need great guard play, which is something that West Virginia has gotten throughout this year. You think of Honor Huff, who hit 5 threes against Kansas State back in January. you're going to need great guard play if you're going to beat BYU. If it's Kansas State, it's the other part of the equation that Ross talked about. You're going to have to win that game ugly. I think that's just kind of the way these two teams play. They're not overly efficient on offense. They're going to hang their hat on the defensive end. And the other part I worry about, not to get too far down the rabbit hole here, but the other part of what Ross said was the teams who win this time of year, they want to be together. They want to get to that next film session. We know BYU does because the more film sessions they have this week, the more likely it is they're playing next week in the NCAA tournament. Kansas State, I don't know if those guys care how many film sessions they have left in Manhattan or with the purple one. So I think West Virginia would have the mental advantage there, certainly over Kansas State. But with BYU, who I think we can all probably expect West Virginia will play on Wednesday, it's like we've said, you got to lock down Devonsa. You can't let Robert Wright get hot, and you probably can't let their best role player or role players also kind of dictate that game if you're too focused on the big two.
Some great points there, Deck. So a few more notes on BYU. This is a team that, similar to West Virginia, has knocked off some marquee opponents, but then struggled against teams that you'd think they'd beat, right? So in the final 4 games of the regular season, BYU lost to UCF, West Virginia, and Cincinnati, 3 teams that finished right in the middle of the pack. And the reason that BYU is the 10 is because it lost to teams that it ended up needing tiebreakers against, essentially, in the conference standings when it all came down to it. But if you look at the sort of the bigger window and include the final 6 games of the regular season, that includes games against top 10 teams in Arizona, Iowa State, and Texas Tech. Now, I know these are 2 home games. You're not playing at home anymore, but big wins over Iowa State and Texas Tech down the stretch in the regular season for the Cougars. So this team is absolutely capable of giving West Virginia a real matchup and maybe even making a little run in this tournament from the first round onward. And I think, Deck, regardless of who the opponent is, when you bring up Kansas State to West Virginia fans this week as a potential opponent, there's probably going to be that gut punch feeling that's like, really? We got to talk about Kansas State again after what happened out in Manhattan about 7 days ago, where West Virginia should have beaten Kansas State, but instead in the second half gives up 21 unanswered points. I mean, it's safe to say that Kansas State won that game because West Virginia went ice cold, went silent on offense. And I know your point there is heard, Deck, that you're going to play good defense against K-State, might end up being a rock fight. A Coach Hodge-led team is going to have to play great defense to win postseason games. But look, it doesn't matter if the opponent is Kansas State, is BYU, is Houston, is Arizona. West Virginia has to figure out these offensive slumps. They have to minimize them, and it probably does start with elite guard play, right? Mm-hmm. West Virginia is going to have to get contributions from somebody other than Honor Huff in any game that it plays out in Kansas City, because Huff is going to get his. He's not going to make every single shot. And there are going to be times because Honor shoots in bulk, right? He's going to take 12, 13, 14, 15 threes a game. Mm-hmm. But he's not going to make every single one, right? There have to be other big spots where guys like Trey Eaglestaff, Jasper Floyd, Amir Jenkins, DJ Thomas kind of goes on and on, but specifically focusing on guard play for WVU, some of those guys are going to have to step up and hit shots.
Well, just look at the BYU and the Kansas State games, the 2 most recent games, aside from UCF, that West Virginia played, just from an offensive standpoint. Against BYU in the win on the last day of February, that was West Virginia's most efficient offensive performance since the loss to Baylor that last 10 games of the regular season. So you look at the final 10 games of the regular season that West Virginia played, that was West Virginia's best offensive performance from an efficiency standpoint, was the win over BYU. Just 3 days later, in Manhattan, Kansas, it was West Virginia's least offensive performance. So you talk about the ebbs and flows of a season. That's a great microcosm right there of what you see and how this team has sometimes been really, really good and really bad. I mean, at least you just need to find the middle ground of that. And they were really efficient, according to EvanMia.com, against UCF in that win. Not as efficient as you look down the line and the loss to TCU and the loss to Utah. But the previous one over UCF was really efficient there too. So it's no secret for West Virginia. Yes, they're going to hang their hat on defense, but if they're not efficient on the offensive end or even marginally efficient, it's really hard to win these ball games.
Right, Dak, and it's funny that you mentioned Evan Mia. I know that both of us are big fans of his website, and I just pulled it up because I wanted to make sure that I had this correct. West Virginia is the worst team in terms of offensive rating, according to EvanMia.com, in the
Yeah.
Big 12 Conference, even worse than Kansas State and Utah, the two lowest seeds in this tournament. When you get to this point in the season, when you've played 31 games and you're going to play your 32nd Wednesday, you kind of are who you are, right? West Virginia is not going to blow the doors off anybody in a postseason game. I think, though, marginal improvements in efficiency in these do or die games is what we're asking for, right? Again, just to be clear, we don't expect that both Honor Huff and Trey Eaglestaff are suddenly going to pop off for like 60 combined points. I mean, maybe it
It'd be
could happen,
nice.
but WVU hasn't. It just had. There's no evidence that that's going to happen, right? But if
Right.
they can perform like they did against BYU, in a potential matchup against the Cougars Wednesday and beyond, then they're going to be at least in a little bit better position to make a little run out in Kansas City, which they need to do from a bubble perspective, because those losses late in the regular season against beatable teams really, really hurt this team's NCAA tournament hopes.
Yeah, definitely so. The losses that we've kind of mentioned, Utah, the Kansas State loss recently, the Baylor loss early in the year still doesn't look good, even though that team does have an NBA talent or two on its roster. So yeah, West Virginia is definitely going to have to help itself. The good thing, if you're a West Virginia fan, is you can sort of talk yourself into a scenario where if West Virginia wins one, probably has to win two at least, and get some help. They're right back in the tournament bubble because this bubble is extremely soft. You think just the difference a week makes, where after the BYU win, West Virginia back up into that last four out kind of category. And then since they've drifted back to that next four grouping, that next eight grouping that Joe Lenardi likes to keep on the page there, but just outside the bubble. So you get one or two wins in Kansas City, a little bit of help elsewhere. Sure, you're right back on the bubble. The other side of that, though, is an early exit on Wednesday. That kind of pretty much just dispels any possibility of an NCAA tournament bid.
Yeah, and Deck, from that perspective, BYU is the team you want to play, right? Because
Yes.
looking at
Yeah,
net
for
right
sure.
now, they're still net top 25. The Cougars are. If you play Kansas State, it kind of doesn't really matter what the result is from a analytics perspective, right? Like from a metrics perspective. You play BYU, you beat BYU for the second time in a span of less than 2 weeks. Maybe that does go a long way in helping, and then you get another opportunity, possibly against Houston, for another big one. So if not West Virginia, Deck, if it's not going to be WVU making a run like the women's team did, who do you think is the team? Who's the team that you're picking to win the conference championship in Kansas City this week?
I think Arizona has to be the overwhelming favorite, right? They've played so well this year. They were the last undefeated team in the conference, deep into conference play before they finally had a little bit of a rough patch, relatively speaking, for Arizona. But I think to be different here, I'll go with Houston. And they have lost to all the top seeds. I believe they were 1-4 against the top 4 or 5 seeds in this tournament. But most of those games against the top teams, they were very close, decided by just a couple of possessions. And 3 of those games were true road games. So you'd like to think with Kingston Fleming and this team that if you get Houston and these other top teams on a neutral floor, their defense, their philosophy will take over. Kingston Fleming's, who I think honestly is one of the more underrated top players in the Big 12. I don't think he gets nearly the recognition that he deserves, very similar to Braden Burries at Arizona. That guy starts going off. Houston is a problem in this tournament. I think their road might be a little bit clearer because personally, I don't believe in Kansas at all. I know Kansas is the 3 seed. I think that team's got way too much going on with the Darren Peterson saga, if you will. There's too much going on there. I don't believe in Kansas for a second. So, I just think their road's a little bit easier for Houston to get to that championship game. And then at that point, it's a toss-up of what really good team on the other side you're going to play. So Houston would be my favorite if you're not going to take Arizona.
Yeah, I think for me, Deck, Arizona is definitely the favorite, right? Like, and just has to be by default because nobody has really shown that. I know Arizona has 2 league losses, but nobody has really shown that they're capable of being head and shoulders better than that team. And it feels a little bit similar to how Houston was last year when the Cougars swept the regular season and tournament titles. So for me, I think Arizona could win this thing running away. But here's a dark horse for you. TCU, the number 6 seed, ended the regular season on a 5-game winning streak. That's the best winning streak in the conference, active winning streak in the conference, other than Arizona, which I think won 6 in a row to end the regular season. I know TCU is not in that double bye category, and that just makes your road that much tougher. Maybe the Horned Frogs could make a little bit of a run out in Kansas City. I guess what I'm saying is, even if they don't win the whole thing, don't be surprised if the team in purple makes a little bit of a run. Speaking of the TCU Horned Frogs, go ahead, Deck.
I was just going to say my dark horse here for this tournament, Iowa State. Don't know how much of a dark horse the team that was, I guess, tied for third, ended up getting the 5 seed is. But I just think with Iowa State, it all comes down to, yes, they didn't end the regular season very well, just 2-3 over their last 5, with one of those being a blowout loss to Arizona, who, like we've mentioned, has blown out pretty much everyone they've played this year. But if Momcilovic can get hot from 3, I think Iowa State's one of those teams. They can beat anyone they play this year. Again, especially in a neutral court. And we know Iowa State, with being close enough geographically to Kansas City here, they will have a good representation, I should say, from its fan base. So if Iowa State gets hot, I think that's a team that could be a dark horse, especially if one of those top seeds fall, just say in their first game or earlier on than expected in the tournament.
Oh, there's no doubt. History shows you, Deck, that Hilton Magic travels to T-Mobile Center around this time of year. So it's definitely possible that the Cyclones, also in similar position to TCU, with having to play one more game to reach a championship, could do the same. So we promised we'd chat women's basketball after the Mountaineers won 3 at T-Mobile Center in Kansas City to win a Big 12 tournament championship for the first time in nearly a decade. We'll discuss the women's team's run when we come back right here on the Golden Blue Nation podcast after this quick word from our sponsors.
The reason I came to the practice was because I had had some teeth extracted and I wanted to get some replacements for it. We did a treatment plan to see how many implants they were going to place, and now I'm actually just waiting to get the crowns. The thing I liked the most about coming here, I was greeted with a smile, everything ran smooth, and that they were really going to do what I wanted them to do to make my smile a little better. They're some of the best doctors, and you will get good quality care.
Searching for a mortgage lender that's 100% local, personal, and focused on home loans? First Green Mortgage has been serving West Virginia for more than 35 years, and they can assist you with every step of your home ownership journey. Visit them in Bridgeport or Morgantown or at fgm.bank.
Golden Blue Nation podcast continues. Nick Farrell here with you alongside Ryan Decker, who joins us from Kansas City, getting ready to cover WVU at the Big 12 men's basketball tournament. But Deck, let's turn the attention now to the women's team, which is certainly deserving of attention after a win in the conference championship game over TCU, a team that defeated it twice during the regular season. But you've probably heard someone say this before. It's hard to beat a team 3 times in one season, and that absolutely proved to be true. West Virginia, 3rd time was the charm against the Horned Frogs. Yes, did they get a little bit of help because Olivia Miles and Marta Suarez were in foul trouble? Sure. But that's college basketball for you, right? You still have to execute. You still have to have big-time players making big plays in key moments. And West Virginia definitely had that in Jordan Harrison, Sydney Shaw, and Mimi Wheeler in that championship game. All 3 of those Mountaineers really stepped up in key moments.
And you definitely, the foul trouble with Miles and Suarez was going to be the first thing I was going to say. Yes, it definitely helped. And West Virginia took advantage of Miles picking up that 4th foul about 30 or so seconds into the 3rd quarter. And she had to spend a considerable amount of time on the bench for someone who plays just about every minute for TCU. West Virginia was able to take advantage of that, and then Jordan Harrison just kept coming up clutch and clutch and clutch down the stretch of this game. Finishes with 21 points, a perfect 10 of 10 from the charity stripe, which ended up saving this game for West Virginia because TCU, a really good team, just kept hanging around, got it down to, I believe, 7 at one point. And if Jordan Harrison doesn't hit some of those free throws late, and some of the other West Virginia players as well, if they don't hit those late free throws, TCU can really make that game interesting last night. So great credit to Mark Kellogg and his team finally being able to capture that trophy now here at this level. And I did look last night because I was wondering for Jordan Harrison specifically, did she bookend her career under Mark Kellogg with conference championships? She missed it at Stephen F. Austin by 1 year. Mark and Stephen F. Austin won the year before Jordan Harrison got there. But either way, Jordan Harrison now cements herself as one of the best players in WVU women's basketball history. And Nick, I was thinking about this last night after the game. Last year, J.J. Quinterly, we said the same thing, cemented her status as a Mount Rushmore type player for WVU women's basketball. is there now a fifth head at Mount Rushmore?
That's a
Like, do
great
you
question.
have to add an addition to Mount Rushmore because of what Jordan Harrison has done? And as long as West Virginia gets to play at home in the NCAA tournament, which it should, what Jordan Harrison can continue to do that really no other star player in WVU women's basketball has done.
The Mount Rushmore conversation would be a bit premature for today because there's still more to
Yes.
do, right?
Yeah.
Like if Harrison carries them to a Sweet 16, which they haven't reached a Sweet 16 since the 1980s, I think, then the conversation has some legs, right?
Yeah.
You know, Quinterly, for example, was a two-time Conference Defensive Player of the Year. She leaves and suddenly Jordan Harrison is the Defensive Player of the Year. But everybody who's followed this team knew that Harrison was a very good defensive player, just like Quinterly was. It was just kind of a matter of time before this became her team. And I think the thing that's so endearing about Jordan was summarized at the end of the game, the emotions, right? Like
Yep.
Jordan Harrison is one of the most level-headed players that I've ever covered in any sport here at WVU, but particularly women's basketball. You know, credit to Quinterly, who had an incredible career, but Harrison, even during that period, I think when Quinterly was on the team, was always kind of like a silent leader, was a silently trustworthy player. Coach Kellogg recently told me that Harrison is the type of player who just works really hard and like, yeah, maybe she gives it attitude every once in a while. He's coached her for 4 seasons, right? But like the amount of times that those things happen are just so minimal because Harrison is just the prototypical type of player that you want to coach at this level. It's a big reason why she tagged along with Kellogg from Stephen F. Austin after she was the conference's freshman of the year out there in her debut season. She was under-recruited because she's undersized. She's always silently carried a chip on her shoulder. And so to have this run that she's having here as she closes out her collegiate career, Defensive Player of the Year, most outstanding player at the Big 12 tournament, 21 points in a championship game, didn't miss a free throw at the Big 12 tournament and clutch in the second half. You want to talk about something that's coachable, right? Coaches love players who can make free throws, and Jordan Harrison was 14 for 14 at the line. It really is just an incredible story for a player who has done everything the right way, and similar to Quinterly, it just feels like that's a dying breed these days. JJ did it here for 4 seasons under 3 different head coaches. Harrison 3 years under the same one, but has gotten better and better and better each year, and is right now, I think, playing the best ball of her career at the right time.
I didn't realize this till I literally just looked it up, Nick. So Jordan has scored 10 or more points, so scored in double figures in each of the last 6 games. The last time she didn't do that, she was held scoreless by TCU. I didn't remember TCU holding her scoreless in the matchup in Fort Worth.
Great
so
note.
what a turnaround that was for her, just individually. And I think that probably came out in some of that emotion last night after the game to go from 0 points in a game that you felt like West Virginia really needed to have there in February to just kind of make that statement in the regular season to turn around and have 21 points and be as well-rounded as she was defensively in that game last night. Kudos to her. Kudos to Sydney Shaw for stepping up. I don't want Sydney Shaw to get lost here in the shuffle of Jordan Harrison. I mean, 17 points for Sydney, hit a couple of big threes in that game. Also had 7 rebounds as this team just continues to get it done different ways with different players. It's been really fun to watch this team continue to take shape over the season. And, you know, I don't want to look too far ahead, but the matchup that West Virginia could draw in the NCAA tournament, it's going to be fascinating to see what style of basketball West Virginia has to play with, especially if they advance that second round game against the 5 seed, if it's played in Morgantown. Do they have to go kind of bully ball with Mimi Wheeler leading the way like they did at times last night against TCU? Or do you let Jordan Harrison, Gia Cook, and Sydney Shaw really take ownership of that game and take the reins of that game and do it with guard plays we were talking about on the men's side? It's going to be really fun to watch this team in the NCAA tournament. Again, we hope it's in Morgantown. That's where it looks like it's heading, but I guess we'll have to wait until Saturday to officially find out.
Yeah, not to put a damper on this conversation, what the women accomplished this year is incredible. But you mentioned Wheeler, and I just want to quickly say Carter McRae also has been really, really reliable late. Our Cody Nesper pointed out that over a 6 or 7 game stretch to end the regular season and entering the Big 12 tournament, including the quarterfinals and semifinals, she was shooting like 85% from the field in a 6 or 7 game stretch, which is what you're supposed to do when you shoot 2-footers, but nobody can do it really, it seems. I think it also shows that was the missing piece last year, right? Like that was obvious at times during the season, But if a player like Mimi Wheeler or a player like Carter McRae was on J.J. Quinterly's team last year playing the 5, West Virginia could have had this same type of run in back-to-back seasons. I know it's a what if, and like what's the point of talking about that when you've just brought a trophy home to the Mountain State? But that was the thing that was the missing piece. The coaches acknowledged that. They went after it hard in the transfer portal. They picked up 2 players who were terrific and have been staples of the starting lineup. And I think, again, it's just credit to Coach Kellogg and his staff. The way that they've assembled this team, it filled the needs that they knew that they had in the offseason to try to reach their 3 goals. Win a conference tournament title, be a 4 seed, a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. That's next. And then if you can have home games in the NCAA tournament, the next goal of making it to the Sweet 16 and beyond becomes just a little bit easier. So we're, of course, going to keep an eye on that. The projections look good for West Virginia, but we're not going to know for sure until Selection Sunday when the brackets reveal. Believe it's an 8 p.m. Eastern selection show for women's basketball Sunday, and that's when we'll find out if the Coliseum is going to host games.
Well, actually, we'll know on Saturday. The top 16,
right.
Just,
right.
Just like in NCAA baseball, the top 16, the regional hosts, if you will, that they do get announced the night before on Saturday. So we'll know officially on Saturday, possibly during, I guess that's what, Championship Saturday here on the men's side, right?
Right. No, that's a great point, Deck. And so I guess one last thought on the women's basketball conversation. If there are home games at Hope Coliseum in the NCAA tournament and that place isn't packed, something is wrong with Mountaineer Nation, right? It is time.
Don't think we're going to have to worry about that.
No, right. It is time to support
yeah.
that team. It is time to make sure that the Coliseum has that edge to make sure that Coach Kellogg and his ladies have a clear path to the Sweet 16 and beyond. If there's games in Morgantown, be there. It's going to be a hot ticket for sure.
For sure. I was telling Sydney last night during our travels, whenever those tickets officially go on sale, I give it about 30 minutes before those tickets are gone. At least from West Virginia's standpoint, of course, there's always things available in the secondary market and those sorts of things. But I give it about 30 minutes, maybe an hour before it becomes official. Those tickets will be gone in no time. I think it's going to be really cool, too, to see the alumni players, like a Georgianne Wells, some of these great players who do come back on a somewhat regular basis if their schedules allow, to see them in the building and kind of watch them be part of that atmosphere. I think it'll be really cool, and certainly will be cool from our perspective to be there and be able to cover that. I mean, I've never seen the Coliseum sold out for a women's game, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. If baseball regionals at home and these other different sports that have played postseason games at home have been any indication, it's going to be a great atmosphere inside Hope Coliseum.
Absolutely. I believe the last time there were home NCAA tournament games, or it might have been the year that they won the Big 12 regular season title, which I think was 2014. That was the last time that there was anything close to a sellout at the Coliseum. The highlights and photos from those games are pretty incredible. What a scene it would be to replicate that this March. All right, Deck, we got to leave it there. We're getting ready. We're recording this Monday afternoon. We're getting ready for the Big 12 tournament special edition of Mountaineer Game Day. So we got to let you go to start getting ready for that. And we'll see you on TV tonight at 7:30.
Yep, see you then, and can't wait to hear Brett Yormark speak tomorrow. I'm sure he's going to have a lot of comments about the court and all the different things. I really mean that. I want to hear what he has to say about the court and its reception from the players, and also the different things he's definitely going to be talked about as far as TV partners and all those different things. And then the action obviously gets started here tomorrow, and from a West Virginia perspective, it gets started on Wednesday. So it's fun time here in Kansas City now that we're finally here.
Deck, I think, that's true. You guys had a heck of a time getting out there yesterday with all that was going on.
Yeah.
I think I'm interested to ask Mark Kellogg this. I think he'd play on a glass court anytime if it meant winning a championship.
If the results turn out the way they did, yes, I think he would.
All right, Deck. Thanks, man. Appreciate your insight. All right, that's Ryan Decker joining us here on the Golden Blue Nation podcast, brought to you as always by Mountain State Oral and Facial Surgery, your premier dental implant destination. We're recording this Monday afternoon. If you're watching or listening Monday afternoon, make sure to tune in Monday night to the Mountaineer Game Day Big 12 Tournament Special, airing at 7:30 on the following stations: WBOI in Clarksburg, WTRF in Wheeling, WOWK in Charleston, and WVNS in Beckley. Also airing on Sportsnet Pittsburgh Plus, SNP Plus, again 7:30 to 8 for the Mountaineer Game Day Big 12 Tournament Special. If you're listening to this after Monday, well, stick with us at goldenbluenation.com for complete coverage of the Big 12 Men's Basketball Tournament with updates from Ryan and Sydney Carriel from Kansas City. And this weekend, as we noted, Mountaineer women going to find out potentially Saturday if they're hosting and if they're one of the top 16 seeds in the NCAA tournament. That's a wrap on this edition of the Golden Blue Nation podcast, brought to you as always by Mountain State Oral and Facial Surgery. For Ryan Decker, I'm Nick Farrell, signing off. We'll talk to you next time.